Okay, let's take a look at the solutions for 11.1, number 3, 4, and 6. So we're trying to determine if the sampling methods are dependent or independent. And again, that depends upon as we collect the data from the samples. Are the two samples related in some way? Does the information, are they connected? So in the first one, we can see they want to compare salaries of married couples. And so the only way you can compare those salaries is, again, because those couples are married, they're connected, the sample data from one has to be dependent on the other because you're comparing those two. So that would be dependent sampling. On number 4, you can see we have a situation where we're looking for to determine the effects of alcohol on people's reaction time. So she divides 100 people. One group drinks 3 ounces of alcohol, and the second group drinks a placebo. And so you're comparing one whole group to the other, not individual. So the sample, you're looking at the average of all of one sample compared to the other sample. You're not matching up people, the first person with the first person. You're looking at full groups, so that would be independent sampling in that case. And then number 6, you're looking at, again, a dependent situation. They want to obtain a random sample of voters and ask, again, looking at this, give their opinion about the part of the sampling is dependent. Again, in this case here, the key in this one is that they're looking at the same group of people. You're asking the same person for their opinion of Democrats and Republicans, and they're going to compare within the same person, so that's matched up together. One person's opinion is being compared. So that is, again, that would be dependent sampling there for you. Now moving on to the actual running the hypothesis test. We're looking at problem 19 and 27. There's a solution over here. This is the written work, but I want to show you how to use StatCrunch, and the conclusion is the important part here. But here you're looking at, we're going to look at a proportion, right? And you ask of the 100 adults surveyed, 400 indicated they were abstainers, right? That they didn't drink. Has that proportion of adult Americans who do not drink, abstain from drinking, changed? And again, we're comparing that to the original survey. So looking at the null hypothesis in this case here. Again, that's been indicated right here. You're checking that the proportion of people from 47, is it equal to the proportion of people who abstain in the present time? And so you have those two samples to compare. So it's a 2 sample. You can see the 47 and then the recent. And then, of course, you have to check requirements for any of that. But again, on StatCrunch, the way we would do that, you're going to do that, stats, proportion steps. Now we're at 2 sample with summary. And so in this case, going back to our 2 samples, we have 407 out of 1100. So you put that in, and then the other one was 333 out of 1100. And so just based on the samples, they're different. But again, these are samples, so we're trying to extrapolate this or approximate this for the population. And so you're just running a hypothesis test that they're equal, compute, and then you see you end up with a z statistic and your 0.008. And so the p-value is less than our alpha, and so then we would reject the null hypothesis since it's less to it. And again, you get different values depending upon you doing it by hand, slightly different values by hand or using StatCrunch. And so then there's your conclusion. Looking at the next one, 27, again, here's the answer on the bottom, so you can see it written. In this case here, what we're looking at is trying to compare these 2 groups together. Okay, so we're going to compare these 2 proportions of what people believe in 2003 versus what they believe in 2010. So you have the two samples. Now we're going to do a hypothesis test and an confidence interval so we can explain, is there a difference? So one group, it was 618 out of 1508, and the other was 1086 out of 1,508. So you can see there are a difference, but we want to construct a 90% confidence interval here to see if there's an actual difference. And so to do that again, you're going to go to StatCrunch. We got to put in the values. And so some of them are, what's the first one? We had 1086 and 618. So 1086 from 2000, and then 618 from 2010, 2003 to 2010. And then we run a 90% confidence interval, 0.90, and then compute. And so now looking at the confidence, you see there's a lower limit and upper limit. So the difference between those 2 years is somewhere between 0.28 and 0.33, or around 28.2% and 33.8% difference in proportion. We're 90% confident of that. There is no overlap in 0, so you can see we're confident that there is a difference in opinion. We could also run a hypothesis test that way, and it should also say, since the p-value is so low, that we reject the null hypothesis that they're the same. That we reject that they're the same. We have to say those values are different. And so looking at the difference between those, we have that. Again, we don't need to do this by hand. We could then do it using StatCrunch the way I've done it. And so we can say, you see where those two numbers came from there. That's 11.1.